All right, welcome back to Mr. Peterson's class.
AKA Boring Land.
Oh, snap, ever since the beginning. Nick here.
Gabe.
And at least one of us is dressed up for the occasion. We are going to be reviewing Taare Zameen Par with Amir Khan and this fine young actor, Darceel Zafari, who plays Ishan. I want to say Ishram, but you're right. Ishan in the movie Taare Zameen Par. This is a movie that was requested for us to review several times for the strict fact that we are teachers, and this has to do with the student and a teacher relationship. Now, when it was first requested, it said student-teacher relationship. I thought like a student-teacher. A student-teacher is someone who trains under an actual teacher before they become a teacher and get their license. And so I said, they made a movie about a student-teacher? Like, I've never heard of that before. But realizing there's a pause, student and teacher, then I said, oh, okay, I got to check this out.
Right.
And we watched it separately, but man alive, this is a movie that I enjoyed immensely. Let me get started just at the beginning here. With the first 45 minutes or so, I was not in love with this movie. I felt really bad for the character Ishan, but when I first watched it, I looked at this student, this character as, you know, this kid's kind of annoying. He keeps not listening. He keeps getting in trouble. Right. And shame on me as being a teacher with having students like this from time to time, where if you have someone that's acting out that much and rebelling that much or just not conforming that much in school, there's usually a reason for it. It's not because they're just trying to get under your skin. It's because either they can't understand, they don't like school, they have trouble at home, whatever's going on. But for me, it kind of took me out of the movie at first. I kept with it. I'm so glad I did because it really comes together as the movie goes on. But those are my initial thoughts at the beginning. What did you think when you were going into the movie?
You know, it's funny because the very first scene, before they open up, before they do anything, you just see like all these grades on there, and then you hear the teacher calling out grades and, you know, calling out names, you know, Amir, you know, 24 out of 25, so-and-so, 24 out of 25, so-and-so, 19 out of 25. And then they come to his name, Ishman, 2 out of 25. And I was thinking to myself, one of the things I never do is share grades that way because, you know, you're going to, embarrass that child, okay? You got to think about what your goal is here. And it's not to embarrass the child, not to make them feel bad about themselves, but at the same token, is to make sure, you know, A, grades should be private, B, is to say, hey, this child may need help, instead of looking at all these grades and just kind of ostracizing them and put them on blast for it, saying, wow, he got a 3 out of 25, somebody else had a 24 out of 25. He got a 2 out of 25, somebody else had a 7. The majority of the other class has 19 out of 25 or above. There may be an issue there. And I was shocked that I kind of disagree with you. The beginning for me was looking at his journey through his eyes and his world, and all these educators here, even when he says, and I caught it on immediately, when he says, she asked him to read in class, and he says, the words are jumping off the page. She said, well, they're jumping off the page, jump with them and read. I thought that was a silly statement to make, and I'm like, how is she not catching on that this kid is dyslexic?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That was a big part also of my problem is when you watch the movie, you want to connect with the character. And I had a hard time connecting with this character just because everyone around was being so negative, and he wasn't responding in the way that me as a viewer want him to respond, to explain to himself, like, I can't read or this or that. Right. And these teachers, now I'm not sure how school is in India. I have no idea. India's a big place, so maybe how school is in the smaller parts of India. Right. But like you said, we can't do that. If you are going to put a kid on blast for his scores or make fun of him for reading, his motivations or her motivation is going to go way down instantly. Right. And you're going to lose that kid. And what was the purpose of that? As a teacher, you need to get through the students. You need to teach them by whatever you can, using all the tools at your disposal, and that just seemed lazy. So for me, that kind of put me off at first because looking at through the lens of a teacher, like, there's no way teachers would just.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
It was frustrating me.
See, but I think that's where you're looking at it from a standpoint of being a teacher here in America and only having that experience. My first few years of education were in Dominican Republic, and same thing like that, uniform. And in Dominican Republic, it's a little different. You're paying. There is no public education. You're paying to go to school. So if you're going to school, you're going to take it seriously. Those teachers are going to take it seriously, and your parents are going to take it really seriously. And yeah, there was the I wouldn't say capital punishment, but there was the punitive punishment. Where
capital punishment. That's like putting people to death.
Exactly, not capital, but there was like
corporal punishment.
Corporal punishment. They would hit you with the rulers. They would make you stand in corners. That does happen in other countries. I know it happened in Dominican Republic. So for me, I was looking at it from that standpoint, saying, okay, we wouldn't do that here. Okay, you know how trouble we did that here. Could you imagine hitting a kid? Give me the knuckles. Could you imagine? That would never happen. But does it happen in other countries? Absolutely. I know it happened in my own country. I just thought, like, it goes back to the Joker movie when he says the worst thing about having a mental illness is people expecting you to act like you don't have a mental illness. You know, the worst thing about this child with his dyslexia is people expecting for him to act like he doesn't have dyslexia and expect for him to just, you know, they thinking he's naughty. No, I can't do it. And I have a physical ailment, a mental ailment that's stopping me from doing it. And instead of trying to help me, you're ostracizing me. You're making fun of me. You're embarrassing me. And like you said, all you're going to do is not crush that kid and take down his motivation to want to learn. So I love the first part. What I did find funny about the first part, we talked about it, Amir Khan's not in it at all. And I was thinking to myself as I'm watching, like, this is an Amir Khan movie. When is he showing up? He's not there in the entire first act. At least the entire first act, yeah?
Oh, yeah, first half of the movie, I would say. This movie, it's so interesting. First of all, I get frustrated with the way the teachers react. At the same time, those class sizes were humongous, right?
40 kids in class?
Oh, it was like 60
kids
kids in some cases, and they were just crammed in there like sardine cans. When you have that many kids, the odds are already stacked up against you. And then you're talking about having one student, which that would be unbelievable when they have one student that's misbehaving. One student who just can't get with it. They send him outside. You forget about the kid, or you intentionally leave him out there forever, and he's goofing around some more. You got the kids in the school are making fun of him. I mean, this kid's got everything stacked against him. And again, he is a young kid. Even his own father doesn't understand him. And not just that, but he's got the older brother who's just good at everything, who's just... And you have kids like that. They're good students. They're well-behaved. They're good athletes. And everything comes easy to them. And then they have siblings who it's not so much. And you're just like, really? That's your brother or that's your sister?
Right.
I mean, you're way worse than they are. And so it was really hurting me inside out as I was watching it. But is it a true reflection? Of course. Does it happen even in America where students get dismissed because of their behavior? Where a teacher has to realize, I really don't have the time right now to figure out what's making this kid tick, even though realizing if I don't figure out what makes this kid tick, like Amir Khan does later on, I'm never going to get through. And this kid's going to go the entire year feeling worse and worse about himself. Now, luckily for him, he was pretty resilient. He had his art, he had his mom, he had his brother to kind of escape to. But then as the movie goes on, we find out that his parents are really concerned, like they should be. The dad's frustrated, and so he's willing to put up some good money to send him to a special school,
right.
To where a boarding school, to where he's going to stay at that school. And the guy at the headmaster of the boarding school says, "Oh, don't worry, we'll fix him. We've had all types of students here. We know what we're doing."
Well, the analogy he used, it was so funny, not to cut you off. He said, "We've broken the wildest of horses," and I'm like, "What?" You know what I mean? Like. What? You know what I mean? It was crazy to me. Like, you're comparing children to animals. We've broken the wildest of horses. I was wow. But continue. I don't really.
Well, as far as I understand, especially from the Three Idiots film, education is taken seriously everywhere. But India, it's taken very seriously.
Right.
And parents ingrain in their kids that education is everything, and it's a great thing to have ingrained in your mind that education is important. But it can be taken too far. To like you were saying, we're sending him off to a boarding school. We're going to break this wild horse. We're going to get through him. We're going to help this kid out. But it's when he gets there and he struggles a little bit, where was that headmaster at? He was too busy doing his job, obviously.
Right.
But I felt like he didn't do the best service for that kid, and neither did any of the teachers. The teachers were frustrated. There was one teacher. I mean, I got to make a comment to it. The one actor, I mean, this guy had some ear hairs coming out of his ear. I've never seen that before. I mean, power to him to have the guts just to, I don't care. I'm not going to trim those bad boys. I never seen that before, but I digress. But I mean, this movie, it's a longer movie, but when we get to the boarding school part, that's where you have Ishan realize his that he is different. Realize that he is not as smart as the other kids, and he's not able to perform as the other kids in this situation. And so what does he do?
He absolutely shuts down.
Completely shuts down, and that's the number one thing you never want as a teacher. If you have a kid that shuts down, you have failed as a teacher, and you may never get that kid back on board. And so he completely shuts down, and even though it's a movie and it's dramatic, I have seen kids shut down almost to that degree before. Maybe not in my own class, but at the school I've worked at or schools I've worked at in the past, and I mean, there's almost no coming back from it.
And I think that what Amir Khan did so well, and at first I'm like, man, he's not. He's obviously, this is from his production company, and he wasn't in the first part of the movie, but that's because you really wanted you to connect with the student, and you see he's trying. He wants to succeed, and he even implores his parents, don't send me away, I'll keep working harder. His mom said, we just worked on this yesterday, how do you forget? Now, the thing with the parents are, there was a part that bothered me about the movie, and we'll talk about that later, but they care. They just don't know how to help. They're not trained to help. But it's not like they ignored the problem. They care. They threw good, like you said, good money at sending him somewhere because they're not understanding that their son has a problem, and they just think, okay, maybe it's a behavioral issue. We as parents can't handle it. I care about my son's future. Let me send him to this reform school or boarding school, excuse me. And it's one of those things where I think a lot of times as parents, think about this. You have your home ec classes, right, where they teach you how to change a diaper and feed a baby and stuff like that. But other than that, do you get real training on being a parent? No, you don't. And where does your training as far as being a parent come from? It's enculturation. You get it from watching your parents. Your parents weren't experts. My parents weren't experts.
Or your peers, and you see that their kids are well behaved. How come my son's not well behaved?
Exactly. But, as educators, we can look at this from a different standpoint because, like I said, the minute he says, oh, the words are jumping off the page, oh, this kid's got dyslexia. It hit me right away. But we're trained to look for those signs. Parents aren't. So you feel bad for those parents because you can see that they're not the bad guys in the movie, so to speak. They just don't know any better, and they don't know how to approach this issue. So they send them away. But that breaks the kid even more, because now he feels like my own parents have given up on me. Could you imagine that feeling? My own parents don't believe in me. They're sending me away.
No, I can't
That's
imagine.
all he's thinking.
Now, just to correct one thing right there, we're not trained on dyslexia.
No.
We can't diagnose that. But that would be one of the possibilities,
right.
And then we would implore the parents to look further into it in the medical field and
right.
try to figure out if they can get tested. But if more times than not, unless the kid's just never at school, they're just absent all the time for whatever reason, or they've been to several schools many different times in their young educational career, we're elementary school teachers. Most of the time, if a kid comes into your class and is way below grade level, if it's not because of those first two reasons I said, it's because there's something getting in the way.
Right.
And it could be something like dyslexia, but that's very, very rare.
Right.
It could be other things to where we have to intervene now educationally, academically, and figure out what's the best plan to help this student get
right.
back on track. Because right now they're below, but they're going to still go to school for the next 8-9 years. So we need to find a way to fill that gap. So maybe in 3 or 4 years they're where they're supposed to be. But that's very it's a very delicate thing to talk to a student about without that student shutting down and realizing that thing that I don't believe is a real thing, that kids are stupid. Right. But the kid thinks that about themselves, I am stupid. Well, maybe not necessarily. You haven't figured out this. I had a student years ago, and I'll never forget this. A young student, a young girl in my class, and she struggled academically very, very much. She was very, very behind. But when it came to other areas, whether it was sports, whether it was arts, whether it was music, she flourished in those areas and she put everyone to shame. But what does she get a grade in at school? Math, reading, and writing. Right. Not on all the other things that she so quickly picks up and excels at. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. So again, as teachers, we have to be very, very delicate and very careful because you don't want to ruin a student's psyche when they're in the 4th grade, right. When they're going to be going to school and living a life after that. There's going to be a point where they're going to say, I'll give up. I can do something else. And then you have some possible dangerous situations. So This really made me feel, and it really brought me to home when I was watching this movie. Felt bad for him. He even had that friend that was very sweet with the crutches who was like, hey, I'm different too, but I can figure out these things. You just got to power through. But luckily for Ishan, he had Amir Khan as his teacher, who worked at an autism school, correct?
Right.
And he was substituting because they needed a substitute teacher for a short time. And, I mean, this guy comes in, clown uniform, costume and everything, and he starts singing to the kids.
Playing the flute.
Yes, he starts doing all these things, and the kids are like, who is this guy?
Right.
Way outside the box, more of an artistic type guy. And he was really able to connect and get that rapport with the students right away. And that, as a teacher, is huge. If you can have rapport with the student. I mean, you can even tell a student, no, that was wrong. You did that wrong. Do it again. But if you have rapport with that student trusts you and knows it's coming from a good place, they'll take that, they won't shut down, and they'll move on. Right. But you have to build that, and Amir Khan's character was very good at building that rapport.
I tell you what, it's funny, you mentioned the friend, and I think the friend was maybe the first person to really get through to Isham and say, well, you're well-behaved, you're the first one in class, you're smart, why are you here? And he said,
yeah.
And he says, what do you mean, why am I here? Isn't the school for bad kids? And he said, who told you everybody that's here is here for behavior or bad kids? And I think that really in his mind, it was a punishment for him being sent there. And one of the things as an educator, I try never to do, and even as a parent, is to associate academics with punishment. When I punish my kids, I find other things to do, but I'm not going to make them sit and do homework, because now what they've done is correlate homework or schoolwork with being punished. So you never want it to be coming from a negative place. You don't want to make that relationship association. So that was the first person to come through. Then I do some things similar, not as well. I've never come in a clown outfit, but I've made my raps for my rounding numbers. I'm a clown. I'm a clown in general, but you have to be different, and you want to make that connection with students, and you want to make sure that whatever you do, you capture their attention, because if they're not listening to you, they're not learning. That's the bottom line. So you come in, you do something different, now you instantly have their attention, and guess what? Everybody's sold. The one thing I loved about him, though, is even though he had 99% buy-in, all the kids are basically enamored with him. They're paying attention. They're engaged. He recognizes the one kid that's not. And he could have easily ignored that kid and say, hey, I've done my job. I got 99% of these kids over here on board. No. He went back around to this one kid who's not, and he didn't push him. And unlike other teachers, he didn't immediately attack him. And there were a couple teachers that used the word idiot. You would never do that to a kid, He's like, hey, what's up? You don't want to do... Oh, okay, cool. He left him alone, but he let him know he was concerned, and then he went back and checked in with him. And I thought that was so powerful, because a lot of times it's not the 99% that needs our help. It's the 1%. The majority of these kids are going to be okay no matter what teacher they're in front of. But those kids that are struggling students that new to do it, that's who you really have to go out of your way to whatever small little victory you can find. Whether it's, you did good in art, or you did good in music, or like you said, athletics, whatever you can celebrate with them, so that they have that self-confidence, that self-esteem, don't feel bad about themselves, and don't shut down. And the fact that he went back to him, back around to that one student, I love that part.
The danger is not to do it during instruction time, not to do it during the time that the other students who are ready to learn that content right now, where they are having to sit back and wait for you to try to get through that student. Amir Khan's character, he did it outside the classroom.
Right.
He was asking other teachers questions. He was asking other kids questions. He was asking the headmaster. He even went to this kid's parents' house.
Right.
And I'm assuming it wasn't, just a few, miles away. It was a far distance. And he met with them. And the conversation he had with the dad, that first time they met in, Ishan's house, was really amazing to me, because as a teacher, when you have a conversation with a parent, you have to be very delicate about certain things, because those are their kids who they love dearly, and telling them the truth about certain things is hard. But he had no problem being bold and asking this guy questions like, let's not worry about what is Sean's problem is. What is your problem?
Right.
What do you have against this kid? He is struggling. Oh, no, he's not. No, he is struggling. There is something going on. Tell me more about him. He had no problem not being rude, but being honest with the dad and flipping it out on him as the parent. Like, you have a responsibility here to your son. What's been going on? And I really enjoyed that. And then when the dad comes back, and I want to get into that yet, but when the dad comes back and they have more conversations, Amir Khan's character continued to speak in that way. Very respectful, but no, you got to understand, what are we going to do for your son? Your son is the one that is, still developing. He's still a kid. You're an adult. You have a job. We need to worry about him. And so I thought that was really powerful. And I liked in the movie, too, how it was a natural progression. It wasn't just like 5 minutes later, Sean's like, okay, you're my favorite teacher. I love you very much. I'll do whatever you say. It took some serious time, and he had to work towards it. And so this is where the film, in my opinion, wasn't completely unrealistic, but was kind of like tiptoeing in that area, because in the culmination of the film, you have this big art day that Amir Khan's characters put together. Now, he is an artistic guy. He's an art teacher, right? And so it makes sense that he would put together an art day, but he gets complete buy-in from all the students and all the staff. They all come down, and they realize that they have a good time. Just, we're just sitting back coloring and drawing. Are you really serious? No. And some of the characters had some pushback, but they got into it. But it was all done because Amir Khan's character wanted to connect with Shashan. And at that point, he was making some headway, but Shashan was still kind of pushing back a little bit. And so he even goes off on his own. He doesn't show up right away. Like, I'll show up when I want to show up. And eventually he does, and he draws. And for me, this is when the tears started coming 100%, right near the end of this film. And for me, that was the best part of the movie. Again, it was a movie, so it was a little unrealistic that you get that much, buy-in in it. Could it happen? Of course. I love Ram's character, that whole speech he gave about how all these influential people, they all struggle with reading when they were younger. That was awesome. And then he connected to his own self because he struggled with it too. Ram, the character, was amazing. He was the kind of teacher that all students deserve to have. Not because he did extra things, not because he put together an art day, but because he, like you said, he was trying to figure out what makes a student tick. How can I get him on board? Because if I can get him on board, we can really start going somewhere with the entire class.
It's funny because you mentioned some of the things he did, and you're right. It wasn't like overnight. It was a natural progression. One of the things he did was, do a home visit. In my entire career, I've done one home visit. Now, I will do things like go to my students' games and things of that nature to show them I care outside of school, because you want to make sure that they understand that you care about them, so that in turn they care about you and what you care about, which is academics, obviously. But I think that what he did was so powerful because he's like, yes, your son needs help, but let's talk about you, sir. What is like you said, your issue with your child? And he's showing him like, you're not understanding that you're a big part of this. One of the things I tell all my parents during parent-teacher conferences, during open house, is education of a child. I base it, my philosophy anyway, on an old African proverb, that it says it takes a village. It has to be a symbiotic relationship. The parent, the child, the teacher. I can't do it on my own. So he's trying to educate the father to, you're a big part of this, how you behave. And you see that even later on with his son that you mentioned, that is tops in all his classes. He's a great tennis player. He loses a match and dad loses his mind. And you're like, you know what? You're not being a good parent that way. You think you're showing that you care, but you know what? Everybody loses. It's okay to lose. And he tells him that in his first interaction. It's okay to tell your child, you know what? A part of caring is, okay, you stumbled, you fell, so what? It's okay. There'll be tomorrow. And that's what your job is as a parent.
Well, I think that was the dad's problem too, is he was looking at his kids in a competition way. Look, right. My kids are better than yours, aren't they? Let's measure them up. And he kind of did give up on Sean, but his other golden boy, like you said, messed with the tennis match, and he was losing his mind. Like, it's not about my kids better than yours. It's about, let's raise our kids so they feel secure with themselves, so they can become a productive citizen.
And so they can feel valued, absolutely. And I mean, there was two powerful things that he mentions there. And that, to me, was the two things I took away from this movie. One, when he's trying to show his Assam's dad how much he struggles, and he says, here, read this, the game piece for me. He says, I can't read it. He said, what do you mean you can't read it? You're an educated man, read this. He's like, it's in Chinese, how can I read it? Well, that's how he sees things. So if you're struggling with this and you're an educated adult, this is an 8-year-old boy, that's the same challenge you have. And I think that really opened the dad's eyes. And then later on, when dad comes back to school and meets with him and says, I just wanted you to know that we care about our student, and my wife's been, our child, and my wife's been looking up things online. And he's like, it's good that you think that you care. However, this is what caring is. And he's explaining it to him, and he says, he talks about the Solomon Islands, and he says, in the Solomon Islands, there's this, and I had to go online and look this up, and there's some controversy about whether it's true or not, but basically the story goes that in the Solomon Islands, the native people go, and in order to cut down forests, they don't use knives or not knives, I should say axes and things of that nature. They just talk and curse these trees and speak really negatively to them, and they will ultimately wither and die. And we've all heard about, if you want a plant to grow, you talk to it positively and things of that nature, and if you don't talk to that plant positively, it won't grow. Well, the idea again is that what you say to these kids as a parent, you're their hero, you're their whole world. So if you're talking negatively, and even his dad called his son an idiot on several occasions, what do you think that does to this child? You know what I mean? And that was the most important part to it. You're not being a good parent. That's probably what you learned from your parents. Again, but think about the psyche of what you're doing to this child. And for me, that was the whole message behind this movie. It was amazing. Amir Khan, I've mentioned this to you before. I will challenge, I think you already said that I might have used it once or twice, maybe once or twice. But you guys can go through all our videos. I do not throw this around willy-nilly, but he is a true artist. He's not a filmmaker. He's not an actor. He's an artist. And what I mean by that is, look at this movie. He's not in a half of this movie because he realized it wasn't his story. Yeah, the teacher plays a big part, but the student played a big part as well, and the parents, and he gave it that kind of care. That's true art, man. And I like you said, the tears started coming. Yes, the tears were coming for me, especially at the end when Dad comes to the school and he sees his son and all the accomplishments he's made. I was tearing up, man. And, this is what movies, this is what music, it's supposed to inspire. It's supposed to make you feel something. And I felt. And for me, every single teacher I know will hear about this, just like Three Idiots. Every single parent I know will hear about this, because we got to stop thinking about trying to live vicariously through our children and thinking, setting this unbelievably high expectations for them. Listen, let them be who they are. Let them find their happiness. And yes, you should stress education, but should it be detrimental to the point where you're hurting your child's emotionally because they don't compare to your other kid or other children? No, you should never do that.
The character showed all educators the template. You've got to figure out a way. And the tough thing is, you're not going to have these kids every single year. Now, in a boarding school, yeah, you're probably going to have a Sean every single year. But for most of us who teach one grade level, we're going to have that kid that year, and then we're going to have different kids next year. And so it's always a cycle. That's why I'm a teacher. I love helping students out because I remember what it was like to be a kid, and I remember how hard school had been. And so if I could help them not only be educated but also have self-worth, then I've done my job. Now, with this movie, I mean, it checked all those boxes. It had some realistic tones to it coming from an educator or educators that we noticed. But, I mean, that ending was really powerful. The parents, they come back to pick up their son. They have parent conferences. They get the report card, all that kind of stuff. And these teachers are just, oh, you're Sean's parents? Oh, he's fantastic. Now, he struggled at first, but Ram really got through to him, and he's been an awesome student. The parents were like, our son, really?
Shocked. Mom was crying the entire time.
Everywhere they went, the headmaster, oh, he's such a great artist. Look at this picture. We had his piece of art on our yearbook. We're so proud to have an artist of his caliber. It's amazing. Going back a little bit at the end of the art, when they all showed their artwork, Ram's artwork was Ishan just loving life and smiling. And Ishan does this great piece of artwork where he's like on the lake or something like that,
yeah,
right?
He's on the lake, and something that which he used to do himself. Go to this lake, look at the little fishes in there, yes. Draws the whole scenery. One thing I want to mention really quickly is how Ram reaches him, because he says to the headmaster, okay, I can help this child, but I'm gonna need your help. He said, okay, what do you need from me? First of all, make sure that everything, all his exams from now on until he can learn how to read, are oral, because knowledge is knowledge. Whether he can write it or not doesn't matter. Right now we know that's his disability. He can't do it because he has dyslexia, but let it be oral. But then what he did, if you notice, was, and as educators we know about this, he used the multiple intelligence theory, where it wasn't just, reading and writing, but he brought out clay, he brought out paint, music. He used all types of different, because kids learn different ways. And I love what he said, like, look, in a hand there's 5 fingers, and 5 fingers are of all different sizes, but they all have a function. everybody's different. Everybody learns at their own pace, and they learn their own way. So he found different ways to help this child learn, and eventually the child did learn. But it wasn't easy. They show all the different things he did, and that's what was so awesome about it. And I'm so glad that all the other teachers said, don't give us credit. Thank, Ram, because he was the one that reached this child and was able to figure out what makes him tick. So I was glad that they didn't say, oh yeah, he's here now. No, it was this one very special educator that helped this child. So I was happy about that.
Yeah, no, that was awesome to see. That was more realistic where they gave the credit to him. And then, obviously you have Ram. He's about to lose his mind. He's so emotional, saying goodbye to Sean for the summer. And the parents are just so excited. I mean, that's what it's all about. I have had students before where it didn't take a lot to get through to that kid. And you're just kind of like, really? That's all it took? Right. I had one student where it was stickers, for crying out loud. You just got to figure out what that is. But getting off that soapbox a little bit, this movie was fantastic. I'm ready to give it a grade. I really appreciate the request. We appreciate the request for this. Being teachers, took us a while to get to it. But I am going to grade this movie with a solid A. I've got to give it an A. I'm not going to give it an A+, because I'm not going to say it was the greatest movie of all time. But I'm giving it an A, something that high, because it really hit home to me. And it was done in a wonderful, realistic way for the most part. And again, it's all about the student, and in this case is Sean, who everyone else saw one way, Ram saw as his true way, and it really spoke volumes.
I got to agree with you. I'm going to give it an A as well. I think the thing about this movie is that, don't try to compare it to another movie. And even though I did that myself by comparing it to Three Idiots, this has its own message. Similar to Three Idiots, but it has its own message. And the message is, the parts in this case are greater than the whole. And it was so important. And all educators, honestly, if you watch this video, all parents, I implore you, watch this movie so that you understand, the role you play in your child's success. And start thinking about success a different way. You should not be quantified, like he says, 95.5, 95.6, 95.7. That's not how you should be judged as a person. These kids are people. And that was the biggest message. So I love Amir Khan. Again, he has turned into one of my favorite actors. Forget about Bollywood. Forget about Indian cinema. In general, I hold him in high esteem. Like I said, I think he's a true artist. And I'm going to give this an A. So go ahead. If you haven't watched this and you're watching this video, guys, watch this movie. I guarantee you, as a parent or an educator, it will, pull on those heartstrings and it will impact you.
It's very soon we'll be able to do like a top 5 Amir Khan movies, right? Always we've been watching. But yes, definitely give us some love if you like this review. Give us some other requests. If you can think of some other teacher-esque movies that are really, really powerful, let us know. And until next time.
Adios.